After Will Smith slapped Chris Rock at the Oscars, it definitely shook up the world of entertainment in many ways. But given how the inappropriate reaction was in response to a joke, it's hard not to wonder whether this was yet another sign that comedy is in danger. Or worse, if this event may have damaged the integrity of comedy forever. So, let's get right into it. The short answer to this question would be no. Comedy will not be ruined by this event. Comedy has always been and always will be a staple of human culture, and it's my belief that as long as humanity is still intact, so will be the necessity to laugh. But with so much change having taken place in the last 2 years, it's worth questioning why this assault took place and how the event might affect comedy moving forward. For those of you watching this video who don't know what this slap was about, here's a very brief recap. During the 2022 Oscars, Chris Rock was about to announce the Best Documentary Feature when he took a few moments to do what he does best and tell some jokes. One of the jokes was aimed at Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, who had a brand new haircut that left her head shaved. He gestured to her and said that he was looking forward to watching G.I. Jane 2, a reference to a 1997 Ridley Scott action drama featuring a bald Demi Moore, but Chris Rock didn't know that Jada Smith had been dealing with a minor case of alopecia, which was apparently the reason why she shaved her head. She visibly made a face of disapproval, and Will Smith seemingly felt the need to defend her. So the Oscar nominee, who later wins that very night for Best Actor, gets out of his seat, casually walks over to Chris Rock, and open hand smacks him in the face. When Smith sits down, he then berates Rock in a threatening tone to keep his wife's name out of his effing mouth. Chris Rock is visibly shaken up, which is totally fair, and then the show just keeps going as though nothing happened. The crowd is of course shocked, but the show itself runs as it would have had no assault taken place. So starting with why this happened, we'll just focus on only the part of Will Smith's motivation that might have been based on the joke itself, because a whole other video could be made about the other side of Smith's motivations leading up to the slap. Speaking of course about Smith's troubling relationship with Jada Pinkett Smith and other pressures of that nature. So why was a joke enough to make one of the most famous actors in the world risk his whole career by standing up and assaulting someone on international television? The answer lies within a huge debate that's been raging on for years as of posting this video, regarding the boundaries of comedy and what it means to watch what you say while you're performing on stage. Let's go back to the early 60s and see another case study that relates to these events we're facing today, the case of Lenny Bruce. You may already know about Lenny Bruce, and if you don't know, go give him a Google. He was a very edgy comedian back in the day when to be edgy was simply to use crude language in your act. But even as recently as the late 50s and early 60s, there were laws in place known as obscenity laws that made it illegal to use certain language on stage. And something inside Bruce told him to ignore these laws. Instead, he chose to lean into his tendencies towards profanity, and as a result was arrested multiple times. First in San Francisco in 1961, then twice in LA in 1962, and then once more again in Chicago later that same year. In 1963, he was actually ordered to leave England after the London authorities caught wind of his act, but that wasn't it. In 1964, he was arrested for a third time in LA for violating the California obscenity laws. He finally decided to move to New York City because all of the harassment, but still didn't change his act. But even on the East Coast, he was swiftly taken to court by undercover police who had attended one of his shows. He was indicted by a grand jury on the grounds that he violated the New York obscenity laws. For the purposes of this video, I won't repeat his act, partly because YouTube has to please advertisers and Lenny Bruce just does the jokes better than I ever could. So what does all this prove? It shows us that even 60 years ago, comedians were the subjects of harsh punishment based entirely on the jokes they made and the things that they said. And at this point in our exploration, I could stop and ask you, did the countless arrests and high-profile trial of Lenny Bruce ruin comedy? I think the 2003 live-action adaptation of Cat in the Hat can beg to differ. Just kidding. All joking aside, comedy wasn't ruined in any permanent way. So I'll save you some time now and say that I don't believe that the Chris Rock incident has ruined comedy either, but it's still a strong indicator that comedy isn't in the healthiest place it's ever been. It'd be a whole video on its own to analyze why Will Smith felt the need to attack Chris Rock, but it almost doesn't matter in the first place because the most troubling element of this event wasn't why it happened, but the initial initial response to the hit. With trending hashtags in support of Smith as well as the Academy's hesitation to remove him from the audience, the assault felt as though it was being treated too lightly at first. The audience applauded Will Smith's speech later on, and he gave a half-baked apology on stage that didn't properly acknowledge the issue. Although the Academy later condemned Smith's actions, there were and still are a lot of supporters of the slap who believe that Chris Rock had it coming. So did he? It's up to you to decide what you think about the joke, but some people do think that Chris Rock took it too far and might have deserved the slap. However, this viewpoint seems to be shared by a minority of people, with most people seeming to disagree, claiming further that there shouldn't even be any boundaries for comedy. But the reason why this topic is so hotly debated in recent years is that no one has really drawn those boundaries, nor has anyone decided what kind of punishment there should be if anyone were to cross a decided on boundary. So the question in this specific case could be asked, are alopecia and other similar disorders off limits for comedians? And if so, should it be trial by slap on live TV? Probably not. But this isn't the only question like this being posed in the world of comedy. There have been countless instances in the last 6 to 10 years of comedians facing controversy for jokes that would have been deemed tame in the 2000s. Some of these jokes have naturally been in bad taste, and it's fair that comedy should evolve along with culture as time goes on. But some of these instances have been dealt with by the crowd taking to social media against the comics in attacks on their character and reputation. And sometimes the organizers of the show would actively cut the comedian's time short. These issues were happening primarily at college shows where those in charge were young people who often have the reputation of standing by their laurels in service of social justice. The motivation isn't sinister by any means. In fact, oftentimes their intentions are very pure, but the actions people often take against comedians in the last 10 years have been questionable and arguably damaging to the platform. A recent example of this took place with Dave Chappelle, who has come under fire in the last year about jokes he made about the trans community and stances he's taken in response to their approach to social justice. He has received death threats, and there were attempts to dismantle his reputation online as well as boycotts of his shows. But on the night of May 3rd, 2022, Chappelle was tackled on stage during one of his sets for Netflix is a Joke. The attacker was a 23-year-old man, and he was actually carrying a knife. Luckily, he didn't use it. But this is where we are now as of posting this video, and it's definitely not a comfortable place for the art form of live comedy. So once again, did the Will Smith Chris Rock slap ruin comedy? No. Firstly, because it's unlikely that comedy will ever be ruined for good. Comedy offers a philosophy to society that most likely will never be undervalued to the point of obscurity. But is it going through a dangerous period? I'd say so. Comparing the recent attack on Chappelle to Lenny Bruce, I'm not sure which one is worse. The government controlling a comedian and berating them with lawsuits, or misguided vigilantes with knives potentially threatening their lives. I'm not going to be the judge of that today, but it's definitely unsettling that the latter is the event that took place in 2022, 6 days ago as of writing this script. It makes it seem like the 60 years since the arrests of Lenny Bruce haven't brought us any closer to knowing where the line should be drawn on what jokes go too far. Perhaps it's just a natural product of change, because there's no doubt that the world is changing in a major way, and comedy is an easy target during times of change. Put very simply, comedy is the process of simplifying reality, and during a time when reality isn't so simple, the process brings forward a lot of discomfort for some people. There are so many things changing for the better in the world right now, but if we don't respect these artists to help us understand these changes as they're happening, our actions could become misguided. Things can get too complex for people to understand, and our cultural understanding of one another could risk breaking down entirely. Also, things would just become too serious, and people just like to laugh. So let's respect our comedians, and feel free to tell them they've gone too far with one simple trick that works every time: not laughing. 99% of comedians are loving people who only want you to like them, and they listen when the audience stops making noise. In fact, that's their whole art form, listening to us and finding out what we like by the noise in the room. Not laughing is the most effective tool we have to keep comedians in line when they go too far. Smacking and tackling them just won't do the trick, and that's something we learned a long time ago on the playground. Sticks and stones. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like to let us know if you like this kind of content, and if you didn't, you're free to leave a thumbs down. Just don't slap me, whatever you do. I've been your host, Ben Ball, and this has been another one of life's biggest questions. See you next time.